Alright, this is Fullest House, 1st edition, where we are playing Vaettiheim. It is turn 30. I feel like I can't even say it. It's a quiet turn. Ever since I jinxed myself when playing Marignan, I kind of dread saying that line. I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious. So we finish research and alteration. This is level 6 for transformation mostly, but there's probably some other useful things. And then, right, we want our skeletons. We've discussed that. And we are doubling down on our arcane probing. No magic sites. No magic sites. No magic sites. Hey, okay. And I do believe this unfound door, I think this is the one that you need level 4 for. There's a relatively common astral site that you have a level 4 mage for in order to find it. So I'll have to double check that. So is that worth all the astral pearls that we spent? It's going to take us a long time to make all of that back. It is early enough in the game, and this game probably will go long enough that we might eventually break even. But yeah, that was a rough bit of remote site searching there over these last 2 turns. And speaking of site searching not working out, our manual site searching did not do any better. In fact, it did worse. So yeah, rough turn for site searching in general. And our blood hunting did not go well. We did lose some patrollers from that indie attack. So we're going to have to recruit some more patrollers. I feel like we probably didn't fully bring the unrest down in that province. We do witness some battles. So there was a battle in Man, and I believe Agartha is sieging Man's capital, although, okay, they're just pinging out. Oh, interesting. So it looks like Late Age Man actually gets a vampire hero, which I did not know. So I was thinking that this was just a ping, but it looks like maybe he's going to be up to some shenanigans. He only has a single death gem, and then, he's up against a serious army here. So I have no idea what Late Age Agartha normally does. It looks like they're going to be making skeletons, so I'm assuming, they have some death mages in here. Wouldn't surprise me if they also have some earth, and it looks like they have some summons of some kind. It kind of sounds like these guys are going to explode when they die. I don't see an ability that actually indicates they would do that, but based off the flavor text here, so they could have some mechanical kamikaze horses. They do have crossbows. And I do know that the Agarthan steel crossbow, I think, is probably the best ranged unit in the game. As ever with these things, it depends, but it's probably the one that does the most damage because of the armor piercing. So yeah, a better than normal crossbow, and they've brought a decent number of crossbowmen here. And then it looks like these might be their sacreds. Yeah, and these blind fighters are kind of interesting. So they're blind, but they have spirit sight built in, and they have very high protection, and then otherwise I think are kind of like unimpressive human infantry. But let's take a look at what bless they've been given. Kind of an interesting bless. So going for charged bodies, which is definitely a divisive pick, and then they've given them a little bit of shock resistance. I think charged bodies also gives, no, it does not. So if I'm recalling correctly, charged body damages, both attacker and defender, and 5 shock resistance is definitely not enough. Now they have given these guys +5 hit points, which is fairly expensive, but they're pretty much human level. I guess they're approaching half giant level. I think these guys are going to end up killing themselves, so not sure about this bless. Unaging, I imagine, is for the mages, not for these guys. Yeah, they're relatively young. I think they might even, they're normal humans otherwise. So yeah, an interesting bless, but a large army and a dangerous army, right? This is going to make a bunch of skeletons and has a bunch of crossbows. And I think that this vampire hero has his work cut out for himself. Let's see, cast Frighten. That is not going to work. He casts Skeletal Body to give himself Pierce resistance, and that's definitely a good idea since he's going to be going up against a bunch of crossbows, but if the plan is to just spam, okay, Dust to Dust is nice in the sense that it kills undead, but there's no way that he's going to, spam it out fast enough to kill all this undead, and yeah, not really sure what the plan was there, but it did not work out. Most vampires are immortal, so maybe the plan was just to gem bait. Let's just double check that this guy, he is immortal. 1 month as well, so he comes back really quickly. So, I guess in some senses, right, why not? He's going to get him back right away. And actually, now that I think about it, he might have been forced into that battle, right? Because he's going to reform on top of the capital, and the capital's under siege. And I don't know if immortals show up inside the fort or outside the fort. Although the fact that he had a gem on him, I don't think you carry gems through death, but I'm also not 100% sure on that. So I'll have to do a little bit of research, but yeah, there's a decent chance that, you know, he's just forced repeatedly to fight that battle, right, as he keeps resurrecting, which would be a pretty rough Groundhog Day sort of scenario for him. And this is probably Satis going after a throne, just pinging a throne, although interestingly throwing a little bit of heavy cavalry at it. So kind of an odd ping, maybe hoping to cause like some friendly fire, which like, yeah, the javelins might do, and it's not impossible that these mages, yeah, like maybe they could do some air magic that would cause some friendly fire. But yeah, just taking a look at some throne on its border. This isn't a very scary looking throne, so I imagine we're gonna see, yeah, they just mind burn that cavalry, which probably used up an Astral Pearl. So yeah, so Satis will probably be moving on that soon. We have an unexpected event. Man, we lose some province income. That's not great, but can't complain with Misfortune 3. Sadly, we lose our scout on top of the throne that Pythium has, and like, wow, patrolling with a lot of stuff. So yeah, this is always a risk anytime you're jumping on a throne, but you know, I felt it was worth it, right? We do get to see like what Pythium is rocking. And it looks like they've gone with a bunch of Serpent Cataphracts who are actually sacred. I'm not huge on these Serpent Cataphracts. I haven't really used like the late age guys, but I played a little bit of middle age where they're not sacred. I don't know, they just seem to kind of underperform. But he also has kind of a grab bag of mages here. And like, yeah, I mean, this is still a pretty scary force. Let's take a look at the Bless. Yeah, I guess they are better than the Battle Vestals from middle age. So magic weapons, always important. Quite a bit of attack skill, which is interesting. Poison resistance, which I guess makes sense since I think Pythium can still recruit Hydras, and probably, you know, Serpent Cult is like their whole thing. So I imagine they can do foul vapors and have a lot of poison stuff. I thought these guys already have some poison resistance built in. Yeah, they do. Although 5 is definitely not enough, and like with 15, they're pretty safe against all poison plays. So yeah, that makes sense. And then full fire resistance, which is interesting, but yeah, I mean, fire resistance is always nice to have. I think they have fairly heavy armor, so I don't know if they need like full fire resistance. 1 hit point, not sure what that's about, and larger, which like, yeah, these guys, they don't have very good attack density anyway, although I think, you know, normally they're size 3, so they at least fit 2 to a square. And like, you know, between their normal attack and the mount biting people, they don't have like the worst attack density. Now they have pretty awful attack density since they can only fit 1 to a square, although at least the infantry, you know, 1 infantryman can fit in a square with them, so that's kind of nice. But I don't know, it doesn't really move their strength to a place that is super scary, and their hit points are still pretty mediocre. So yeah, I don't know. It's not like it's bad having more hit points and more strength. And then yeah, some low level evocation. Probably not going to be able to see too much of their research. So anyway, they have a lot of stuff on this throne. They are definitely defending it. This is, I think, in the cap circle of Pangea. So possibly they are thinking about jumping in against Pangea. And again, just kind of interesting that Pangea, I don't know, maybe they have a non-aggression pact or something, right? I mean, like to have a force that large that's sitting in your cap circle, but then go and engage in a different war, very, very ballsy. And then we finish construction of a fortress. I think this is for the enchantresses in that cave. And then yeah, our patrolling apparently wasn't good enough, but we at least did some. And I'll catch you guys after the cut. All right, this is the situation and what we're doing about it. I suppose first things first, probably the biggest news is we're going to move in on the throne as threatened. This is pretty similar, you know, to what we used in the war in Bogarus. Starting to get to the point where, like, maybe going to try to standardize, like, maybe groups of, you know, 25 to 30 crossbowmen seem good. About, like, 15 to 20 sacreds seem about right. And then in terms of mage support for our sacreds, I think in an ideal situation, it is still very mage intensive, right? But we'll want like, you know, 1 mage to do, well, this mage will do some blessing. Ideally, we will grab our prophet once he's done preaching, and we can, you know, cut these mages. Because it's definitely not an efficient use of these mages. Blessing is a little bit of a problem for Vaettiheim. So anyway, currently we need 1 mage to bless our box, and then we want 1 mage for the quickness, and then in an ideal situation, we also have at least 1 mage for body ethereal. We'll probably need like more than 1 mage, or we'll definitely need more than 1 mage if we want to get like full coverage of one of these squares with body ethereal. But then again, we do pack in really tightly, so I don't think we'll be too far off. And then we'll also want 1 mage for wooden warriors. So we don't quite have that ratio here, but that's probably what we'll try to aim for in the coming war. But I think we're close enough. I don't know. We'll see. I do feel like I still tend to give the thrones a little too much respect. But that said, I have had some embarrassing failures in single player. Briefly crossed my mind that we could potentially try to cheese this throne because we are about to unlock Foul Vapors, which is definitely something that we can cast, and we do have poison resistance, full poison resistance on the Bless. However, a lot of the units that we're going to be going up against, like the Shadows, the Fire Snakes, they don't care about poison, so this is a bad target for Foul Vapors. But what is not a bad target for Foul Vapors, although I need to go double check Pangea's Bless, because they do have a significant amount of their sacreds in here. So if they have poison resistance on the Bless, then, Foul Vapors isn't going to be as good, although we'll still eliminate a lot of units. And then it's going to be really good against Archocephaly, because they're just using mundane troops. I haven't seen any of their sacreds. So yeah, I was already feeling, pretty good about this war. But I think we have another avenue to soften up our enemy's main stacks before our main stack engages them. And then speaking of that war, we're just continuing to penetrate our raiding groups in. I think we're going to end up with about 6 Wolf Brother groups. And we're probably going to deploy the majority of them against Pangea. I do think Pangea is probably the greater threat, and we're more likely, unless it all goes wrong, we're definitely going to grab one of the capitals that they have. I'm still not planning on going too hard after their capital, but I do think kneecapping them, pretty severely right at the outset of the war is a good idea, even though a good amount of this territory we just won't even bother trying to defend, right? Because Marignon will be able to move in and take it, and probably Pythium this will also trigger Pythium to come in, right? And as we get land raided away up here, that's okay. But it'll keep any Pangean reinforcements off of our back. Not that there really looks to be a whole lot of those other than mages. But we will have to attack Archocephaly as well. Realistically, we're going to need these 3 provinces at minimum. And of course, this is too many provinces for just our Wolf Brothers to hit. So we are doing a bunch of twice-borning on our mages, which is definitely cutting in to our death gems. This is a pretty significant expenditure, even though it's cheaper for us. And we don't actually have a great death income yet. So, maybe if this is the Throne of Death down here, we will claim it just for the death gems. Not really sure how to balance that yet. We might sit on it for a little bit. There could also just be a Well of Pestilence here, but it doesn't seem like it. There's too many militia, not enough of them were diseased. So anyway, we're probably going to use the first wave of these twice-born mages just as skeleton raiders, right? They're stealthy as well, so they can sneak in and go after more lightly defended provinces, and probably just provinces that are closer on our border, simply because they're kind of slow. We want to move them in last so that we can get the research in. And then speaking of research, so we did hit Alteration 6, so probably the second wave of twice-born mages that we do, we will also transform them. And so there's a decent chance that we'll get some large kind of super combatant-ish chassis from that. Not living ones, right? Because we have Misfortune 3, and Transformation is a spell that is influenced by your luck scales. So generally, it's best to do it, with Luck 3 or at least no Misfortune. And it's kind of a questionable spell in a lot of ways, but the good news is, right, because if you twice-born ahead of time, if you're killed or you get a really bad result from the transformation, you can just go suicide, and then when you come back, worst case scenario, it'll just work out like a normal white mage, so the little tiny chassis, which is fine, right? We don't have to pay upkeep on those, and that is starting to become a bit of a problem. But in the case where they transform into a large chassis, when they die, they'll become a large white mage. Now, of course, undead units have a lot of counters, so, are they super combatants? It's arguable, but they're certainly going to be much harder to take out than, little Vetty hags. Is this a good use of all of our death gems and nature gems? Time will tell. We might try to hold off on the transformation shenanigans until we are able to put up Mother Oak, which is, still pretty far away. I think once our Pretender comes out, they should be able to forge us the boosters, although we don't have the research for the boosters yet. So we may actually advance construction ahead of 5 and 6 for the necessary boosters, so we can cast Mother Oak like ahead of our blood magic, because, as discussed, our blood hunting is not going great. We actually did patrol down all the unrest here, so I'm not really sure why it dropped so precipitously. Blood hunting with only blood 1s isn't ideal, and so in that vein, and in the vein of getting our blood hunting going at all, we're going to deploy some of our cap-only mages who are blood 2s, and so, we're going to start another blood hunting operation and kind of, compare and contrast. These are pretty similar provinces in terms of population, so, we should be able to see, a pretty stark difference between the blood 2s versus the blood 1s blood hunting. We may switch over completely to blood 2s once we're able to do that, because the research differential on these mages is actually not that significant, right? These guys research at 16 in our magic 3 scales, whereas our cap onlys are most of them are 18 thereabouts. So there actually isn't that much of a research difference between the two. And I think there'll be a pretty significant difference in terms of return on blood slaves. So we're going to try to get another blood hunting operation set up here, and then we'll probably also blood hunt a bit down here. So to that end, we are starting to recruit, more patrol groups. We've recruited just some regular indie commanders to lead those patrol groups, so we don't have to waste stealthy commanders. We'll probably replace this guy. May have over-recruited indie commanders. I don't know. I want to try to get patrol groups up on my forts a little bit earlier, so we kind of have indie commanders running around in a variety of places. So we'll see. Still haven't completely decided what we're going to use for those patrollers. Nature gems or death gems are kind of the best option often for patrollers, but those gem types are kind of already spoken for us. There are probably some options in blood, so that might be our first use of our blood slaves. We might try to do some crossbreeding just for patrol garbage. Otherwise, still pretty low troop recruitment, considering that we're planning on launching a war against two different nations simultaneously in the not too distant future. This is probably going to be the last of our Wolf Brother recruitment, and then we're going to switch over to crossbowmen in this fort. We are still recruiting our sacreds. We'll probably also try to work in some berserkers. I'm not sure it's going to be necessary. The Vaettiheim have been performing really, really well, and we have built up a decent stack of them. So it might not be necessary yet to break out the berserkers. But we are struggling already, even with this low level of troop recruitment. We'll probably have to cut some mage recruitment, because we're recruiting a lot of mages, actually. Kind of a crazy amount of mages. I mean, it's not, you should recruit a lot of mages, but this, I think, is far and away, especially for this early, because we're recruiting, we're mages out of, this forest, 4 forests, right? And then, pretty much all of our forts. We did have to downgrade to a Vaettiheim here. I also realized that, this is a citadel, so I haven't been recruiting enough mages. I've been wasting a few commander points here. But now it's just going to pop out Vaettiheims, even faster, because of course this is a forest, so it doesn't matter if there's a fort there or not. So anyway, recruiting a lot of mages. We are not building. I was tempted to start this fort. I think we're still going to hold off just a little bit longer. I don't know, maybe another 4 or 5 turns, maybe until we build up enough troops to launch this war, and then we'll start this fort and start to recruit these independent mages. The other thing is we do want to build a lab here, partially just for defensive purposes. We'll move what are these guys? The Azure mages. We'll move at least a couple of them in there and give them some water gems and just have them hang out and research. But the other thing we're going to want it for is bishop fish, which are recruitable or summonable holy threes, which will help with our bless problems. Of course, we don't actually have any conjuration research yet, and we don't have any queued, so we'll get there eventually. It's probably a good thing that we're recruiting so many mages, because our research is still, not fantastic, right? And we, the plan was to just kind of use our foreign recruit mages as our research boosters, if you will. However, our air guy, the random guy that we got, he's arrived at the steel ovens, and I figure, we're about to start getting sorceresses out, and it could be a little while before one of them randoms into air, but when one of them does, she can pick up and, do the rest of the air site searching. We have a good enough air income, right? We're never going to be able to spend a ton of air gems. because we're never going to have a ton of air mages. So we're just going to have this guy hang out and forge alquils. So yeah, I think that more or less covers it for us. We do also have a little bit of recruitment going on our border forts, just to provide like some bodyguards for mages and a small garrison at least. I guess we should take a look at our scouting. I don't think we've caught like too much interesting this turn. Utgard has quite a large force that's just hanging out on their capital. This is the throne that Satis pinged. We are trying to move some more scouts into Satis's land so we can kind of get eyes on them. They are relatively large, and I think a decent player, so definitely somebody to keep an eye on. We do have a non-aggression pact with them, but we are interested in what they're up to and what they're doing. Speaking of, the Merfolk Nation is looking quite substantial. We did find their capital, so nothing too crazy going on there. Just some of their phalangites, as well as some of their sacreds, and then some mystics for research. Don't actually see any of their cap-only mages. Maybe they're out site searching. I think we do spot one on top of this fort, which has been cracked, right? We've seen a couple battles here, and yeah, there's a king of both worlds. So, they could be out leading troops or doing site searching. But yeah, I know this player is pretty good, and they are proving it. They're pretty large. I am actually curious to see if they've made it to border this other ocean, right? Because if they were able to get into this sea as well, I'm not sure anybody would be able to kick them out. This is where Relay is. They're in here, and we know that Atlantis is probably somewhere around here. But yeah, anyway, they're looking pretty substantial, so we're going to keep scouting them. We've more or less found the extent of Gath, right? This more or less is Gath, which they're a good size. They're probably about our size. And then we've spotted two more factions. So we've spotted Jomon, who looks like they have attacked Tianqi and are probably doing better than Tianqi, considering that they're in Tianqi's capital, their cap circle. So we do want to keep an eye on this conflict, but there's a decent chance that Tianqi is doing a lot of patrolling on their capital, and this is kind of our only scout in the area. So we're just going to skirt around and try to get a sense of how this war is going, and then if we see Jomon's flag hop on top of here, then we'll hop our scout on top. But yeah, I'm not sure how big Jomon is. I don't think they can, unless they're really long and stringy, which is not impossible, right? We can see the Merfolk Nation is down here kind of constraining them. Obviously, Tianqi is here, so maybe they picked up a decent amount of Tianqi's territory, but then, here's Agartha up here, and Midgard was, right here. So, they can't be that big. And I think that almost rounds out all the remaining nations. We haven't actually seen Atlantis yet, but we do roughly know that they're here. So it doesn't really it looks like we know most of the major powers, at least in terms of size. It can be kind of deceptive sometimes. Just because you're big doesn't always mean that you're strong, but usually. And then, of course, speaking of big, there's Raga, and nothing really new to report there. We didn't really catch anything interesting going on in their lands. So yeah, I think that covers turn 30.